I'm lucky to be talking today to Tony Banks. Tony, good to speak to you.
Good to speak to you too.
You also have out a rather nice box set called A Chord Too Far, which features a lot of material from your solo albums. And we just played a track called Lucky Me, which is one of my favourite tracks on your debut album. And when you were putting this box set together, what was the plan? How did you figure out sort of working the material across 4 discs, what to use and what not to use, perhaps?
When I originally had the idea of doing this compilation, I originally thought I was going to do a sort of maybe a single or a double CD set or something, which would have made it quite difficult, I think, to do the choices. But the record label, Esoteric, were very keen to do a longer thing. So with 4 CDs, I was able to use a large amount of what I've done, really, and just weed out the 1 or 2 tracks that I wasn't really so sure about. The main thing was to work out how to sort of put it together, I suppose. I didn't really want to do it chronologically because I think it becomes predictable that in a way, and I felt that apart from perhaps keeping my sort of later stuff, which is the more orchestral, classical stuff, out of it, I thought I could mix up all the rock tracks and just treat all the tracks like they'd all come out at the same time and try to make what I would have thought was a good order if they'd all been done at the same time.
The thing about doing a solo album when you're part of a big band, as you are and were with Genesis at the time, it's quite a big step, really, even though you are pretty well known and you're famous and you've got a lot of respect for being part of a band. Stepping outside of the comfort zone, if you like, of being one part of a band must have been incredibly daunting for you.
In some ways it was daunting, yeah, I suppose so. I was confident I could write a piece, and I always wanted to write more than I had, because obviously within Genesis, because we're all writers, you often only got sort of like a quarter or a third of an album or a bit more, depending on how lucky you were. So doing things away, I really wanted to do that, to try and follow one idea all the way through. The difficulty came with trying to make decisions like, who was going to sing, who was going to play drums, and all the rest of it. I wasn't at that stage keen to sing myself, so I had to find a singer. I found a chap called Kim Beacon, who had a lovely voice, I think. So that side of it all went pretty smoothly, really. I had a slight problem when the producer-engineer, Dave Henschel, got mumps just before I was due to go in the studio, so I had to start off without a producer, as it were, and do it with just the tape op and stuff. But we actually had quite a good time doing that. And, once it sort of came all together, we were pretty happy with it. I mean, I still, that particular album is one of my favourite things I've ever been involved with, actually. It summed up a period for me.
Yeah, I find it odd as well that the singer, Kim Beacon, who does have an incredible voice, sadly no longer with us, but he was in a band called String Driven Thing, who, of course, were on Charisma Records.
Well, I didn't know that at the time, funnily enough. I was sent a bunch of tapes by lots of people, and I heard him singing He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother, which is a song I've always particularly disliked. But I thought his voice, I like the sound of his voice, although it could be good, and contacted him, and he was very enthusiastic, and, and it was fun to do, really. I never saw him after making the record, really, and so, had a sort of period of time, a few weeks, when we got to know each other really well and everything, but after that, that's sort of it, really, I suppose, because the record, obviously, it did okay, but it didn't do anything terrific, so we kind of never had reason to get together again.
When the album came out, I was surprised that there were certain things on there that I thought, I could have imagined Genesis doing this, but there were other things that I thought, oh no, this is a little bit different. How much of the album was written specifically as a solo project, and was there anything that could have been potentially used for Genesis?
Well, to be honest, the whole thing was written with the idea of doing a solo album, actually. The opening piece from The Undertow was something I originally wrote as a possible introduction to the song Undertow, and then there were 3, although I changed it a great deal because we were asked to write the music to the film The Shout, and I had this piece that I thought I could adapt to work, and so I did that. And I felt that although the film I thought was quite a good film, actually, I felt the music was a bit underused in the film, so I sort of thought I could do something more with this piece of music and use it as a starting point for the solo album, really. And, I mean, if we'd been another Genesis album, if we hadn't had the slight break in our career at that point, I'm sure some of the tracks would have ended up on a Genesis album, really. There's no particular difference in the way I approached it. It just happened to be what I wrote at that time. I sort of see it a bit like, an extended version of something like One for the Vine, which obviously was a longer piece anyhow from the album Wind and Wuthering. And it was just like carrying a sort of idea like that over a whole album as opposed to just having the one song.
You've mentioned The Shout, and obviously the next album that came was The Wicked Lady. And I'm thinking, again, I'm very surprised that you didn't do more film work, because if anyone in a band is going to do a soundtrack, it's usually the keyboard player, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I did, I did try and write more films. I mean, I wasn't offered them really, and unfortunately, the few I did do, none of them were really particularly successful for whatever reason. And once or twice, when I was asked to do slightly more interesting films, I didn't really have the time. And in one case, I was sort of we split company halfway through. I was originally writing the music to the film 2010,
right,
a few years later, and unfortunately, the director and I didn't really get on. He had a certain approach he wanted, really, which was strange because he actually, when he hired me, he actually sang the music to The Shout.
Right.
Because he thought it was so good. And I thought, well, this is going to be easy. It's the sort of stuff I write in my sleep, Yeah. And I wrote a piece and so he wasn't very happy. So, it was unfortunate, really. And if that had been, there were a couple of other things I turned down at the time. And maybe if one of those had taken off, you just don't know, really. I mean, that's the way it goes, really. It was difficult, though, while we were Genesis were touring to fit these things in. I
believe you were also offered the job of maybe working on the Terminator soundtrack.
This is a kind of somewhat apocryphal story, I think. But I was sent the script.
Right.
I think along with a lot of other people.
Okay.
As a possible writer, and I couldn't do it because we were in a Genesis moment. I'm not sure I would have been the right writer for it anyhow. So, and also the film did very well, and I think the music that went with it was good, So, but yes, it was something that I was sent the thing. I'm sure I could have done a demo, and who knows, it might have been accepted, it might not have been accepted. But I've never really found out how many people they sent it to. But it's probably a lot more than just me.
Well, I suppose it's nice to be considered, even if they did send it to somebody else.
Well, it's true. I mean, I got sent quite a few at various times, and one or two that I quite liked, and then you'd find they never got made, these films, So I think there's a lot of these things flying around all the time. Although a lot of music, like we did with The Shout and even The Wicked Lady, you're very much brought in at the last minute when the film's pretty much finished and asked to do the music. And I think that some of the best films, where music's used best in films, it's normally when it's done earlier on than that, I think, and more integral to the film.
What is the process for doing something with a film then? Do you actually see the rough cut of the film, or do you get maybe 10 minutes of a scene and they say, we want some music for this scene, or what?
Well, all the ones I've done, really, I saw most of the film before I wrote the music, I suppose.
Okay.
Particularly The Wicked Lady I saw pretty much finished, and The Shout was finished, really. I mean, to all intents and purposes, they suddenly remembered they hadn't got any music, so that's why they got us. But I think in many other cases, people are involved much earlier stage and everything, and one would want to do. I was involved in earlier stage with 2010, actually, for what it's worth, but as I said, I didn't get to the next stage with that one.
You did do an album where, although you said on the first album you didn't want to sing, but you did do an album where you did sing all the vocals. Yeah. How satisfying was that for you?
After Curious Feeling came out and everything, there was always this problem, this identity problem. In those days, you kind of, if you were the name on the album, you should be the singer. I mean, that's probably these days you can get away with it a bit more, but so there was a slight identity problem. And I thought, well, I'll give it a go, really. I could sing in tune. That was about it, really. I had no desire to be a singer as such, but I thought it'd be quite fun to have a go. And so I started singing a little bit on demos and things, and thought, well, that could sound all right. And went in the studio and did it. And I mean, as a writer, it teaches you a lot about writing, really, because you find what's actually more possible and stuff, because I was always a bit dismissive with, if Pete said he couldn't sing a thing, I'd say, come on, you can do it, and things like that. So, I found myself simplifying everything a bit, and particularly lyrically, I think I didn't feel quite so comfortable singing about goblins and fairies and everything, so they were all rather more realistic lyrics. It was a fun thing to do. I think the record sounds fine, really. I mean, I think if you don't know me, my voice is sort of okay. If you know me, then you hear me too much in the vocals, I think. I think in a way almost it's best to be foreign. I think non-English speaking people seem to like my voice better than English speaking people, so there must be a reason for that. I'm not sure what it is.
You did go back to bringing in other vocalists after that album, didn't you?
Well, that album, it didn't prove to be a fantastic success, and I just thought, what the hell, I thought, I really went the same route as Mike had gone, really. He went for the same route. He did a solo album with another singer, then he did one where he sang, and then he did one where he gave the name of a group, which suddenly proved rather successful. So I thought, well, I'll give mine the name of a group, Bank Statement. Got a couple of really good singers in. I wanted to work with having worked with Toyah on a previous record, which was an experience I really enjoyed. I thought we made a really good track together. I quite fancied the idea of working with a female voice as well as a male voice. So Bank Statements really was me with two singers, and unfortunately, if it had gone anywhere, maybe it would have survived a bit more. But the record, record did okay, but not great. So then I said after that one particular, I thought, well, to hell with it all, I'm just going to use whatever singer I fancy using, So then I used about half a dozen singers, went a bit mad, really, on the album still. I think it maybe was the most accessible album, but it didn't really, unfortunately. I never quite got it off the ground. Had a couple of singles that might have done something, but, it didn't really go. But the idea of working, I think most people have a better voice than I do, so why not get a better singer than yourself in?
I think the Bank Statement album, it struck me as being quite European, to be perfectly honest with you, and I thought that would have been hugely successful in mainland Europe. Well, I mean, how did you feel about that project? Because it did seem at the time, I remember reading interviews, and you were very positive about the band sort of doing well. And I thought it was a really interesting album, and a very commercial album as well.
Well, I don't know. I can't say. Every time I put one of these records out, I thought, yeah, this one's going to do it, And they all did rather less than their predecessors. I think it's sort of difficult, right? The trouble is when you're a solo artist, a solo person from a big band, although it sort of helps a little bit to get you, sort of gives you a leg up in the first stage, I think later on it doesn't really. I mean, I don't know how interested I would be in a sort of like a solo album by, I don't know, Johnny Fingers or someone,
Right.
I mean, are you going to bother to listen to it? It's not whether it's good or not, it's irrelevant, you've just got to be bothered to listen to it. And of course, particularly with radio stations and everybody, they're not really that interested, they've got to listen to 20 or 30 records, which they've got to select a couple for their playlist,
Yeah.
So, it's a good reason not to listen to it, I think. And I sort of suffer a bit from that. The only time I came close to having it, I think, was when I did on the next record where I used Nick Kershaw on a couple of songs, and we had a song called I Want to Change the Score, which, got a certain amount of interest, but I couldn't get beyond the next stage. And of all the albums I put out, I thought Still was the one that had the best chance, but, it didn't really happen. So anyhow, that's really why I put them all out again. I think that they've all been deleted for quite a long time now. And I just thought I'd put them out there so that Genesis fans who, might find something they like on it, really, because, obviously I'm part of the writing team for Genesis, and if it's the songs you like, then there should be plenty of stuff here you could enjoy. So put it all in one place, and you haven't got to make a decision which one to go for.
Yeah.
and then I've also, of course, the fourth CD is made up of the orchestral music. Starts off with the orchestral pieces and then demos for that and everything, which is a sort of another side to my writing and playing and everything.
I think the box set acts as a really good primer, though, for your solo career. And I think maybe people who might have passed it by might latch onto this, because obviously you're going to get all the Genesis fans who are interested in it. But with a solo career, you're not necessarily looking at the fan base of Genesis. You're looking to get beyond that, I suppose, aren't you?
Well, you always want to, but on the other hand, when if you're putting out a sort of a 4 CD collection of Tony Banks music here, it's quite difficult to get interest beyond the Genesis fans, I would have thought, really. You haven't got a single or anything, so you've got nothing particularly to make people listen to it, and it's out there. It'll be what it will be. But you never know with these things. Anything can happen, really. But my primary thinking is that this is for people who've liked Genesis, particularly those people who like the early days. A lot of people say, you changed so much and everything. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, particularly Curious Feeling, and some of the later pieces, particularly in Island in the Darkness from the album Strictly Inc., which is a 15-minute piece, which do very much recall the Genesis period of the 70s, which some people sort of crave, I think. So, here you are. There's a few extra possibilities.
The box set is coming out very shortly, but also the catalogue is being looked at again and being reissued, as you've said. So how do you approach that? Are you looking to remix stuff or maybe sort of change things? I know you shouldn't really ever try and change history, but sometimes, obviously, technology has changed in the sort of 30-plus years since Curious Feeling came out. Yeah. Is there anything you think, well, actually, I'd just like to tweak that just a little bit here?
We did the whole Genesis catalogue where we actually went back and revisited all the albums and did bits and pieces. Partly that was to create surround sound mixes and everything, but there was always something you could do to them. And the idea was, I don't think if anyone heard them sort of just casually would notice any difference.
Right.
So with this, what I'm doing really is I'm doing the same thing on this really, because we're going to do surround. They want Esoteric wants surround sound mixes of everything, which I'm very grateful to do. I'd love to do that. I've already remixed a certain number of pieces which are remixed for this compilation. Also, we did redo Curious Feeling 2 years ago, and we remixed that, and I think that benefited a lot from the remix. I've done most of the next two albums, Fugitive and Soundtracks and everything, and quite a lot of bank statement. The main work will be just doing the last two albums, which we didn't touch on this compilation. We kind of did them as they were. But it's fun for me to do. I think it's fun to have it out there, and it just means they're available if people want to have them, really. But the compilation album, is probably what I've been focusing on for a few years. It's a chance to put it all in one place and just so people can have a chance to see what's there.
Well, we're going to go out with another track in a second, which features Fish on vocals. I'd like to ask you actually finally about that, because of course Fish was a singer in Marillion who was seen as, in inverted commas, a Genesis-type band. How did you feel about working with him?
Well, when it was first suggested, I wasn't too sure, actually, but then, I thought, well, what the hell, and I met him, and he was such a different personality. I mean, his voice may end up sounding a little like Peter's, but he's such a different kind of personality. And actually, we got on great, really. And when we did the first, he did 3 songs with me, really. The first one was Shortcut to Somewhere, which was a possible use in the film Quicksilver, which was fun, and we sort of, got on well. And so the next time I was looking for a lot of singers, I got him in. And, we did 2 tracks off Still. And I think one of them, I don't know which one you're going to play or which one you have played, I know where we are. But the one that I like best of the ones I did with Fish was the Angel Face, which is where I had to make him sing exactly what I wanted him to sing, as opposed to the other two where I let him get away with it a bit, because he's a sort of singer who likes to play around with the melody a bit. He's not too good at singing a written melody, but I made him do that for Angel Face, and I thought it just sounded really good. I thought it was a good song.
Tony, it's great to speak to you, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the catalogue coming out, because I do like collecting stuff like this, because I feel very much when you invest in an artist, when they do reissue these things, you like to get them. I'm certainly a big fan of the box sets and the remastered and the deluxe editions of these albums. Tony, thanks for speaking to us today.
Okay, thanks a lot.